the biggest threat with AI is accidental. You kind of do something and your intention is not clear in the system and it does something else. And that's what's more riskier. And I think that's why it's very important that this should be a very contained development. So that's the part that terrifies me. And I think it's a genuine concern, not like what you see in the movies where it will come alive, get jealous of you and kill you out. I think that's ridiculous. That's not the real concern.
Welcome to the AI Grapple podcast. My name is Kate Vandervoort, founder and CEO of Social Mediology and the AI Success Lab. Today, I am joined by Arshad Hisham, an internationally recognized entrepreneur, CEO, and thought leader in AI, automation, and robotics. He's the founder of InGen Dynamics, a company that has built an $80 million revenue pipeline and been featured in global publications like Forbes. Arshad is also an Edison Award silver medalist, has advised major institutions, served on the Edison Awards jury, and even designed AI curricula now taught at top engineering universities. In this episode, we explore the future of AI, how close we really are to AGI, whether AI will make us smarter or replace us, and the high-stakes challenges around safety and regulation. Arshad also shares fascinating insights on AI's role in healthcare, the transformation of education, and why we should all be preparing for a world shaped by autonomous systems. It is a thought-provoking and essential conversation, so let's dive right in. Welcome, Arshad. It's great to have you here.
Thank you, Kate. Look forward to a very interesting conversation. And thank you for having me on the show.
Oh, I'm very much looking forward to this conversation. I think the intersection of AI and robotics at the moment is mind-blowing. I use that word a lot at the moment, but it truly is mind-blowing. But before we dive into the detail of all of that, can you give us a bit of background about you, how you've gotten into AI, and what it is that you're working on at the moment?
Sure. Thank you, Kate. So I started out my career as an engineer quite long back, maybe like 24 years back, to be honest. And I started with IBM. And before that, I dabbled a bit in neural networks and AI. It was not called pretty much AI, it was called a neural networks and back propagation. I had a couple of research papers I published in 1997 when I was 17 years old in college. So I did play around with that a bit. And I think, the real life hit me and I need to pay the bills. So I got a job. So that was in 2000. I started my career with IBM Software Labs. Worked a lot over 8 years with Government of Australia, Citibank, Mutual of America, Government of Greece, Toyota. Had a very interesting careers. Worked in several continents. Had a career from consultant to account manager to project manager. Went for an MBA at Cranfield, which is one of the top B schools in Europe. Finished that in 2008-9. And it was a terrible year to graduate. And, it was a Lehman Brothers bust, that year. So I decided to become an entrepreneur because it was a very bad job market. So I started. So I ended up creating 5 companies. One of my companies got semi-acquired by subsidiary of General Motors. And I've started companies in online gaming, hardware point of sale system, vehicle automation systems. And my current company is AI Automation Robotics, started in 2015-17. We have had a fantastic run so far. It's been a hard journey. Got a ton of press coverage, featured on Discovery Channel, Mashable, Popular Science, to name a few, featured in more than 80 plus academy, including MIT, UPenn, Wharton. I'm also a frequent speaker in robotics and AI, including Columbia University, the Walt Disney Company, BCG. And we have managed to accumulate 80 million in revenue pipeline, 157 million in funding commitments. Along the way, I ended up being an Edison Award silver medalist. I'm also on the jury of the Edison Awards committee. I sit on the board of at least 6 startups. I also invest part-time in startups. I'm also on the advisory council of several universities, helping them design, the academic curricula, I've also designed my own engineering curriculum going live in several universities as we speak. So I think it's been kind of a wild ride. And I've been very fortunate to be at the intersection of AI, automation, robotics, and education. So this is very passionate on all those four fields. I also have a philanthropy that I run called the Edge Foundation, where we kind of do education for free. So that's running in parts in Africa, in India, and we give all that for free because I think education is the greatest leveler, more important than money. And part of the reason I do that is to uplift communities. So I do that on the side.
That's amazing. I think that's one of the things I'm most excited about with AI is the opportunity for leveling the playing field in a lot of ways. So I look forward to hearing a bit more about that. And what a full life you have. That's very,
I'm grateful.
very full. Yes. And it must, when I hear people like yourself who've been working in this space for such a long time, I think you must sometimes just scratch your head at the rest of us who post chat GPT and now suddenly interested in this field and can see the real, the real world tangible benefits. Because you've obviously seen it coming for a long time, but for, a large part of the population, it's all quite new and daunting. So I look forward to hearing some of your reflections about that. So I'm going to hit you with a big question up front because it's one that's being talked about a lot at the moment. You've obviously built your career at the forefront of AI and automation, robotics. How close do you really think we are to achieving artificial general intelligence or AGI, or have we already? And what do you think the hurdles are around that?
Sure. I think it's a great question to open the conversation, right? And I think just to answer a couple of that, I think we had some astonishing breakthroughs in AI. Well, there are large language models that can now engage in near human level conversation, right? And it's kind of controversial because a lot of people say it's just language. It's not intelligent. It's just predicting this world. And I'll give you an example. Let's say you have a crime story and you give the whole story to an AI and you ask a question, uh, the murderer is dash, fill in the blank. It's actually completing the sentence, but it's actually doing a lot of intelligence in the background. So it's debatable whether LLMs are not intelligent. And another interesting aspect, I mean, we as humans, in our evolutionary history, language is the most powerful tool that we created to spread intelligence. Without language, we couldn't have press, we couldn't have spread. And the way we can, and if you see that's the main difference between other primates and humans is a very intricate language we develop. So it remains to be seen. I think the trouble came with all these questions and answers is that, to be very honest, nobody knows. There are a lot of experts, nobody knows. So that's the brutal truth. Even the people who are like designing this just don't know how this is going to pan out. So I think it's a very, very interesting time we are in. And it also depends on the definition of AGI, right? So what exactly is AGI? And do you really need an AGI? Okay, so I think as humans, we may be better off with a lot of specialized AIs than an AGI from a practical perspective, right? And this is kind of where things are running. And so and robotic systems are learning from this real-time environment feedback. And that's very fascinating over the last couple of years, is how robots have started to learn like human. This never happened, in the last 100 years. But over the last couple of years, what's happening in physics simulators is that you can actually train robots for 10,000 years inside a simulation. Let that sink in for a minute, and then they come out, and that simulation is done in 40 minutes inside processors. And then the robots then come out, they're trained for 10,000 years, okay? And then they come in and, they can do that. So that this kind of training never existed. So this is all coming out because of AI. And there is a trend towards generalized intelligence, and there are differences between narrow AI and AGI. But I guess some of the bigger question is: can we have true reasoning? Can we have common sense and context? Can we have self-reflection? So these are the three big questions that I would ask according to our definition of AGI, right? So what is self-reflection? Would it have a kind of a metacognition, awareness of their own knowledge gaps? No, that is self-reflection. Can it do that? Can it have common sense and context? Can you give an everyday scenario which has infinite variables, and can it figure out what to do? And this is notoriously difficult. It comes to us as intuition, but this intuition is very powerful. It's one of the
Well, it's
most
not
powerful
always
things.
easy for humans, and we're the ones training the technology, right?
Absolutely. And I think we take it for granted, this intuition, and this is very powerful. This genetically hardwired a lot of this powerful cognitive techniques we use unconsciously. And this is very powerful. The robots and AI still cannot even match maybe a small percentage of what we do. Still cannot. So that's how big the gap is. And that's how amazing our human brain is, to be honest. That's how amazing our human brain is over evolutionary. And such a big computer. So in terms of and the timeline, maybe years, maybe decades, and it also depends on the definition of AGI. But the way things are developing, I would say there is something out in the spectrum. And then there is also another thing I want to add to this conversation is that, excuse me, it's not just the AGI, it's also the ASI. It's a superintendent because there's a curve that's going up. Okay, and you're talking about AGI, which is over here. So the train does not stop there, right? The train is going to go up. So the minute you're going to have AGI, because the growth is exponential, very shortly you're going to have ASI. Then you can't be able to figure out. And I'll give you an example. We can visualize things in 4 dimensions, humans, right? And if there are 11 dimensions, and this is a thing that can start thinking in 5 dimensions, we won't even understand what the hell it is talking about, right? And this is a very realistic scenario coming in. Once you hit AGI, the next stop is ASI, and that will be like days or months away, right? And are we ready for that? So I think it's coming very near. So I think I'm 100% certain it will happen. This I'm very sure on the AGI. The way developments are happening, things are happening. But I'm not sure if it's going to be years or decades. It could be in 3 to 4 years. It could be, I think, worst case, 2 to 3 decades. But definitely, I'm 100% certain it's going to hit us between this time scale.
And so, someone who knows as much about this as you do, is that exciting and thrilling and exhilarating for you, or is that slightly terrifying, or is it a bit of both?
Yes, I want to put the first disclaimer out. I think as I said, the more I learn about it, the more I read, the more I realize, the less I know about all this. Okay, so just want to put that disclaimer out there. So I think it's hard to predict. And if you see our history of making predictions about technology, Kate, I think we have been notoriously poor at it. IBM famously predicted there will be market for five computers in the world in 70s. So I think five personal computers. So I think we're very poor at predicting how technology changes our challenge. But given all that, it's a bit of both. And I think what concerns me is that this time around, if you see all the technology and the tools that have come out in the history of human evolution, think about carriages, automobiles, steam engine, right? And let's look at automobiles. When the new automobiles came in, there were a lot of boundary conditions. These are like accidents that could happen, right? Which we can go back and correct later on. Like, the roads are not proper, the brakes are not working properly. So when that happened, there were some fatality, there were some injuries. We could go back and fix it. So every new technology has an adoption curve. So that's what I'm really, really worried about AI and AGI or any of this tech is that the boundary conditions are extreme. So we may not have the luxury of recovering. And some of this boundary condition may trigger an extinction level event. When if it has the wrong nuclear codes or if it gets into, and this may not be by design, this may not be an evil person sitting behind the desk plotting. This could be, and that's what people don't realize. The biggest threat with AI is accidental. You kind of do something and your intention is not clear in the system and it does something else. And that's what's more riskier. And we're going to hit several of this milestone before we hit AGI. And that's a very risky road. So the boundary conditions, we should be smart enough to navigate this boundary condition. And I think that's why it's very important that this should be a very contained development. And and with all the recent developments, it's all going open source. It's getting spread all over the world. I think it's getting harder to contain. So that's the part that terrifies me, and and I think it's a genuine concern, not like what you see in the movies where it will come alive, get jealous of you, and kill you out. I think that's ridiculous. That's not the real concern, and this is a real concern. And the challenge is, and on the good side, Kate, I think this is going to solve a lot of health problems. This is going to solve a lot of diseases. This is going to plan our energy use very well. This is going to revolutionize education. This is going to increase longevity. This is going to increase quality of life. And so there is a lot of plus points. So definitely, and this is true for every tool that you create, right? I think as animals, we evolved and we became an apex animal because of the tools we create. Very important. It's the tools. And it's the first time in our history that we have a tool that can think for itself. So that's what is groundbreaking here. And that's why it's going to be so different. What's going to happen in the next 5 to 10 years? And there are other philosophical questions. I was reading about this the other day. It's about purpose. It's not about money and wealth. Even if you have universal basic income for everybody in 10, 20 years, would you be happy to lead a life without purpose? I think the job gives purpose to every person. It gives a meaning to life. So if you have all this AI and robots taking away all that, you will fundamentally start thinking it can all be done by AI and robots. Why should I even try? So what's the purpose? And so there are a lot of things that we need to really think about. And in fact, I'm releasing a book potentially in the next month. It's a book series called 2035 series. You can have a look at my website. It talks about AI, automation, robotics, and education in 2035. So it extrapolates what's currently there and now, and kind of explores some of these challenges. So I think it's a very, very interesting time, scary times, exciting times, all rolled into one. But there is no way we can prevent it, right? I mean, the
Or
genie is
predict
out of
it.
the
Yeah.
bottle. Yeah, yeah, we can
Yeah.
prevent it. We can put it back. So we need to now deal with this and figure out the best way, as humans have always done, by the way. Humans have always done this, even with nuclear technology, with automobiles, and even the spinning jennies, right? And the Luddites, if you see there are a lot of temporary pushback in terms of labor and labor displacement, but it always ends up that we have always found a way. We have always gotten better at the end of it. So I'm optimistic. I'm pretty certain that we'll find a way, and we'll all be better off in 10 years because of this in good ways.
Yeah, there are 100 questions now in my head that and a lot of different ways this conversation could go. And I want to come back to that safety guardrail kind of issue and who's responsible. But you know, I also use similar analogies to other massive shifts in technology that we've had over time. And maybe it's just because I'm alive at this time, but this feels like it has a lot more at stake than some of the previous transitions that we have gone through as humanity. And the pace at which it's happening, I think most of the world don't even really understand what's going on. Those of us in our little AI bubble who work in this all day, every day, are really across all of this. But the majority of the population really have no idea what it is that's coming. So when we look at that piece of safety guardrails, responsibility, I talk a lot about the human-centered, ethical, responsible use of AI. When we look at who's responsible for that, most average everyday people would say, I've got no influence over that. So where do you see the responsibility sits around that safety issue as we barrel headlong into the future that we're creating as we're building it as we're flying the plane?
Great question, Kate. And I want to give you a nice, it's not a story, it's a historical truth. I'm not sure if you're aware, but I think in the 1400s and 1500s, European countries used to plant forests so that they can make ships 100 to 200 years later. So they'll get wood for the ships 100 to 200 years later. So if you think about that kind of thinking, it doesn't exist now in governments and people. It's very short term. It's very short term. You're not thinking for the next generation. You're not thinking for humanity as a whole. You're not even thinking for your country as a whole. So I think it's all shifting because of the new way capitalism is. So you need to understand not just tech, even the economy and capitalism is also evolving. The capitalism that existed 100 years, 200 years back is not the same that exists now. I think the cycles are faster. Companies become very valuable. Ideas go out of hand very faster. So this has also forced people and governments, nation states, and societies to think more short term. So I think that thinking should change, right? You need, just like you're planting forests to make ships 150 years later, because none of the people who plant the forest will be alive. They all knew that. But they did that down the line because, the next, even not even the next generation, couple of generations later, they'll have forests where they can make nice ships, which can then use for livelihood. So we need to start thinking like that a bit more, right? We need to start thinking broader and we need to kind of work together as a civilization rather than as a country, rather than chasing on the short term. And and the challenge Pete, is that everybody knows this, but you have different priorities. If you are as an entrepreneur, as a leader, everybody in the bottom of their heart, they know that this is true, but they just can't help it because the forces at play right now, it is so hard to balance all this. Right? Can we have the US and China? Do you think they can collaborate on AI safety? I think we should get them to. We should get them to, right? It is super hard at this time. And so this is a challenge because the guardrails needs to be there and we need to have a pattern and it needs to be a coordinated effort. And one good thing that's happening is that it's getting open source. So that is both good and bad side. Right? The bad side is that anybody can have access to it, they can play around. And that creates a significant risk because somebody can trigger some of this boundary condition, which cause a problem. But on the other hand, it also hedges, somebody holding information and accumulating the wrong thing. So even if there is something wrong, because there's a lot of open source information, people can figure out how to fix it faster. So and I think it's good. If you see right now, even if you see the recent events that happened around DeepSeek, how they have solved, some of this in a very, very smart manner, and a very resource driven manner shows how unpredictable all this works, because the US literally sanctioned against shipping hardware units to China, and because they didn't have enough thing, they innovated. So US, in fact, accelerated innovation by putting sanctions, right? If they're not put sanctions, so this is how unpredictable technology innovation is going to be. So I think we need to be very, very coordinated. We need to have an understanding, and I think we need to have institutions like European Union, countries come together, a lot of collaboration from academia, because I think the good side, if you fix all this well, kid, is good quality of life for everybody. I think we can have a utopian world, where we have very healthy people, no wars, less famines, very controlled, and it's not only for humans, it's also animals. Right? We can prevent slaughtering of animals. We can even have, so there are a lot of things can be done in a good way, which can be predicted. But it's
Absolutely.
very, very
Yeah, I mean,
hard.
the potential for what AI could bring to humanity is immense. But when we look at 4-year election cycles and politics, as you talk about, all that short term thinking and the geopolitical implications are immense and very complicated. And if we've got governments making 4-year cycle decisions, it's very hard to build relationship even in that time around collaboration or to overcome some of the barriers to that collaboration. So I love the vision that you paint, and I know there's a lot of us on board with that vision, but it does sometimes feel a little bit futile of how are we going to do what you've just talked about given those geopolitical issues and our leadership cycles. It's And the EU has taken a much more conservative approach to AI than the rest of the world. And so, because it's going like a steam train and you've got everyone trying to find where they sit, It's very difficult to collaborate and have kind of a longer term vision when people are holding on for dear life as it accelerates. But I truly hope that we are able to work through those issues and have what you're talking about, because humanity does depend on it, not to be too dramatic, but it does. And it's interesting, I was really interested in what you were saying about the unintentional consequences. I've noticed in some of the communities that I'm in, people thinking they're being clever, where they say, oh, I asked ChatGPT to scrape 20 Facebook posts and it told me it wasn't able to scrape Facebook posts. And so what I did was I said, oh, no, I don't want you to scrape Facebook posts. I want you to look at these 20 posts. I want you to copy the text and put it in the first column of an Excel spreadsheet. And then I want you to copy the URL for that post and put it in the second column. And ChatGPT goes, oh, sure, I'll do that. And you want to extrapolate that out further. You can then see a version of, I'm not asking you to build a bomb. I'm asking you to build me this little package that has got these certain elements, and that if I press a button, it creates a big bang. And so you can even see it now in the models, how people are working around those safety guardrails. So I'm fascinated to see how that side of things in particular is going to unfold, and how that can just be done in a way that is equal, that brings people to a similar quality of life.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think it's a great example you gave, Kate. I think, and this is why there's a lot of stress around what they call explainable AI. I'm not sure if you know what it means, because right now the way it works is like a black box. You put something in, you don't see how it's thinking, right? But a lot of the even the deep seek, if you see, it explains the steps, what it's
Mm,
doing, which is very important, because explainable AI is one step where we can start implementing some of this guardrail. And I think that's where I think this commercial interest and this ethics collide, because making it explainable make you vulnerable to competition. So giving you an
mm,
example there. So
yeah.
this could technically address some of the things, but it's a great example you mentioned. I think you're absolutely right. If you can potentially extrapolate what you mentioned and how the models are abused to more boundary condition, and who knows, and see, the probability is just so high, kid. I mean, you have so many people working on this model, so many conditions. What's the chance that you think one of them will hit on the wrong condition? Almost 100%, right?
Mm,
Let's be honest here.
mm.
I mean, that's the truth. It's because there are so many people, so the boundary condition will happen. So the question rather is, do we have the correct guardrails in place?
And then when you throw in things like, I mean, there have been 3 huge Chinese models that have dropped in the last week.
Absolutely.
2 of them are hardly being talked about. Everybody's focused on DeepSeek, and heck, it's probably more than 3, but that's just what I'm across. And you try these platforms, they're incredibly sophisticated. So it looks like they've just come out of the blue, but they're incredibly sophisticated. And when you throw that into the mix, it's accelerated the pace even more, because everyone that has a financial stake in this is now desperately trying to put out functionality and be the best and become the household name. And it's hard to do that in a conscious, staged, gradual
Absolutely.
way when there's
Absolutely.
so much geopolitical and commercial
Absolutely. But what it has
stake.
also done, Kate, just want to add that point. What it has also done, it has kind of shaken the invulnerability of Silicon Valley, number one. Second, it has shaken the fact that you need billions of dollars to create this, which is both good and bad. Okay. Now, I'll discuss on the bad part first. This means that anybody with $6 million could create something like this in the next generation. That's scary. That's not a lot of money. $6 million is chump change for a lot of companies. And the good part is that, yes, you're not going to have major economic disparity by having a few controlling this massive, powerful tool. You're going to have a very distributed. So this is what the DeepSeek has kind of radically shifted, and a lot of this. See, I love the Silicon Valley to kind of define what I've done, and but I also feel there's a lot of hubris in Silicon Valley, right? There is a lot of hubris, around the things only here the things happen properly, right? So I think that's been shattered, which is good, and and which is a wake up call for everybody. So innovation and tech is like a great leveler. It just goes where there is more efficiency in money, talent, and effort. It doesn't care where you're located. So,
Yeah, interesting. So to shift gears a little bit, I was really interested looking at your website around the work that you're doing with AI healthcare companions. I have a background in healthcare, and I absolutely see the massive potential for how AI can completely transform what are pretty broken healthcare systems in most places around the world. I'd love to hear more about your approach to AI and healthcare, and specifically about these healthcare companions that you're working on.
so I think healthcare. I mean, one of the things I'm doing, Kate, is that I'm working a lot on what they call Cinderella sectors because these are like very nice story time sectors may not be great return for investors. So this includes healthcare like elderly care, send initiatives, special needs, autism. And one of the reason I want to get involved in the sectors is that this has can create a lot of impact potentially. Specifically, humans may not be very lucrative, like a social media company that can be a unicorn, right? So, but this can have a lot of impact. And in fact, I'm working a lot with the UK, with a lot of UK entities. I'm in touch with several UK universities, in touch with the UK High Commissioner, met a couple of high level authorities in the UK, and we are looking at how we can work together with the NHS. So this is one thing that we are interested. But the approach here is to what are the low hanging fruits that we can do and deploy straight away, rather than looking at very complex products. Like if you see, we have a phased approach. We don't have like complex humanoids taking on all kind of jobs straight away. We have simpler robots, simpler form factor, and they're not even robots. We even have software, AI, consulting, education. Where can we make an impact in the short term, right? And that's what we're concentrating on. And I think that's my focus with healthcare. How can we kind of make an impact? How can we change? And especially institutions like NHS, where it's severely strained, it affects millions of people. If you can create a product that can make life easier for everybody, that's fantastic outcome, irrespective of the commercial benefits. So that's what I'm concentrating on. And because of this recent case, I've had a very, very tough journey because I have full board control of the company. I have so many investors, but I've negotiated full board control. And the reason for that is that I need to stay true to all these visions. I don't have financial minded investors driving this metrics. So it gives me the freedom, but it also kind of cash straps me because I don't have enough capital to do a lot of things, right? So that's a sacrifice you make for venturing into some of the Cinderella sectors, as they say, right? It feels great. So I'm trying to get around it, but I think this is a great sector which could make an impact. This is a great sector. I think it needs a lot of these tools and specifically around elderly care. I mean, the truth is that it's something that we can also use. We are also going to get old, unfortunately, right? Elderly care is for everybody. Nobody's going to escape that. So it's something that we all need to plan for. How can you have a more dignified end of life? How can we support all these people? And also with the SEND initiative, we have a lot of children born on special needs, autism, dyslexia, 6 to 7% of the population in the US. So how can we make life better for them? Can they have a companion? Can they have a tutor, a friend who can be there without replacing the human connection, but can they at least make the journey better? So these are things that if you can use tools and technology, it makes a difference.
It's one of my favorite applications of AI. In fact, one of the first custom GPTs I built when they first launched was a study buddy for my 10-year-old daughter that was highly trained in she loves dance, she loves netball. So all of the examples that it gives her are all, really tailored for her. And it's trained to never give her the answer, but to coach her towards the answer. And that level of hyper personalized learning and support, both from a healthcare and an education perspective, is hugely valuable. And I really acknowledge you for the approach that you're taking, because some of them will be very lucrative areas to invest in. but it sounds like you're staying very true to the values behind that, which I really want to acknowledge because it's not always the case.
Yeah.
Now, one of the other things that we haven't touched on that I'm fascinated about is this ongoing debate about AI complementing versus competing with human intelligence. So, in a lot of my work, I have people say to me, oh, AI is just going to make us stupid. And my response is always, that could be how we approach AI. However, the magic happens with AI when you bring the best of who you are, your skills, your wisdom, your knowledge, your intuition, and then really look at how AI can help you do more and be more and create a greater impact in the world. So, what's your perspective on how businesses, how society prepares for how AI impacts decision making, creativity? Is it going to make us smarter or dumber, for want of a better word?
So I'm going to tell again. I like telling these analogies and stories, right? I'm going to tell a kind of a short that happened in my life, right? When my granddad, he's a banker. My dad and my granddad, they're both bankers, right? So I think when they started using calculators in the 60s and 70s, his dad said that don't use a calculator. You prepare it on paper. You're gonna get dumber. You're not gonna understand how this is gonna work. And that's the generation. When he grew up, he said to his son, don't use a scientific calculator or a computer. Use a calculator, right? And now I'm gonna say the same thing to my son about AI and ChatGPT. So if you see, it's the same thing happening again and again. So I think as a tool, it does free us up to do more complex things and it gets a lot of the legwork done. We're kind of standing on the shoulder of these machines to do more reasoning, which is absolutely fine. So I don't, and I think it's wrong to say that don't use AI or ChatGPT even in organizations, educations. You should use that, provided you understand the context, provided you understand how it works, and provided you use it in the right manner. I think that's the right approach. So definitely the tools are probably going to be needed. It is not something that will make you dumber. I think it's going to make you smarter. But again, kid, the challenge here is that, see, again, a disclaimer here. I can't say, nobody can say they know the answers to this, but these are all speculations, right? The challenge here is that with all the tools and disruption that has happened, this is very different because technically when you have a new product coming in, it creates I want you to listen to this, in a very different context. Any new technology that came in creates a space, and you can sunset the old technology, and then the humans learn the new one and all that. The challenge what's happening now, the AI automation robotics work coming in kind of go in and directly replaces the human working in all the section. So there's going to be a generation which will need to be reskilled very fast. So this will be a huge demographic challenge in the next decade for a lot of the governments, and none of them are prepared for this. They're not even thinking about it, unfortunately, right? So there is a huge need to refine education, prepare future innovators, workforce automation, key skill set like human AI collaboration, ethical and social awareness, and things like that. We need to kind of concentrate. And unfortunately, this has not been very thought. And this is one of the reasons that I'm also doing this, Kate. Education is part of my pillar because of this reason. If you see, we are into education, AI products, and because of this reason, it's going to play a major impact. So until unless you do this reskilling, where you learn the new skills, there is going to be a significant disruption. There will be. And but it's not certain. It depends on what actions we take now. If you reskill everybody, the disruption can be minimal, right? But if you don't reskill, then the new job will need 70% of your, like what I mentioned, 70% of the new job that's coming in the next 5 years will have AI automation robotics. So can you do that? If you can't do that, then either you can retrain or bring new skill in. So this is a challenge. So and retraining, I think the education is going to really change. Because that's one of the things I'm covering in my book on education, right? I think Education is not something you're going to do till you're 20 years old anymore. Education is going to be lifelong from now on. So this is a paradigm shift we're looking at, right? And that fits in nicely with us.
I almost think there's something that's going to happen. Well, I do think there's something that's going to happen before that, though, which is, and I'm starting to see the beginnings of it now, is I think we're actually going to see some massive backlash towards AI. And where I'm seeing it is in smaller, distinct places, but like the writers' strike in the US last year, that was all very much around AI. We had a supermarket strike here in Australia before Christmas that grounded all of the supply chain to a halt. And what they were asking for was to have it written into their enterprise bargaining agreements that they wouldn't be replaced by AI. Now, that company can't give those assurances. And I'm starting to see it on things like Facebook ads. When you start to see people talking about AI, there is some massive backlash coming from, I think, whole industries, whole job sections. And it's very hard. If you lose your job to AI, it's going to be pretty hard to then be positive about retraining in a new role around AI. So I think we've got some really interesting and very bumpy years in the short term around that transition. And I too am very passionate about education. All the work I'm doing is around the culture change that needs to happen in these organisations to ensure that they bring people along for the journey, because if people are stuck in fear, they can't see the opportunity. And so I think this backlash is, you know, may not be as bad as I think it's going to be, but I unfortunately at the moment, given the lack of conscious conversations that are happening, which is why I started this podcast, if I can just play my little role in bringing some
So,
of these conversations out and having people think about it in a more conscious way, then I feel like I've done my job. So it'll be really interesting to see how that unfolds, because it could get very messy very quickly. And I
absolutely.
hope that there's enough of us working in this space to help that transition happen, because there's a lot of the tech industry that is kind of barreling ahead, going get on board or die. And it's not a very compassionate or human centric
Sure,
approach.
sure. Absolutely. And I think this goes back to my earlier point, Kate. I think this backlash is necessary because it will force people to think slightly longer term. So some backlash is necessary. And I think that's going to, I mean, even in the retraining, s- when some of these disruptions start happening, the backlash will happen and the institution will start implementing these policies for retraining and all that. Unfortunately, this is how it's going to play out, as you rightly said. This is not going to play out because that's again, the problem is again the short-term thinking, the yearly profit P&L report that they have to generate. So this is kind of a challenge, right? So this is how it's going to be, unfortunately. But I think it's good. Some backlash will force some of those guardrails. Will force a smaller thought through transition through all this, for all the stakeholders, which I think is very necessary because end of the decade, let me tell one statement. We are creating this for all of us to have a better life. Let's be very clear. So let's not forget that for a minute, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And you just have to hope that everybody does have that at the heart of what we're doing. But I think there's a lot to work out in the meantime. Um, so, InGen Dynamics, your company has grown into an $80 million revenue pipeline under your amazing leadership, obviously. How do you see the current AI boom reshaping business models, investment strategies, startup ecosystems? I mean, one of the things I often look at is it strikes me that even the whole SaaS model of paying per license for, I think that's a whole area, billable hours in the legal system. There are whole business systems that are fundamentally going to be changed. What are your reflections on that?
Yeah, I think the whole business as a whole is going to have radical shifts, and even the way the SaaS things are done is also going to change. I think there's going to be a fundamental disruption in all of this. And this again goes back to the cycles, Kate. I think, the cycles are getting shorter. So what used to take 20 years is now, if you see, it's true for economics, it's true for technology, right? The economic cycles are getting shorter, if you see. And the same thing goes to technology, like the industrial boom, industrial revolution, like 100 years, right? The computer age is 20, and the AI could be smaller. So what it means is that companies has to adapt faster, and things go obsolete way, way faster. So there's going to be a lot of disruption, but I think it's going to be a very we're gonna see a lot of 1% and 3% unicorn companies now, and that's going to be really fascinating. Now, this is going to give a lot of people a full license, a full freedom to create and bring their ideas to life, which is also good. You may not need to know how to code, but you can, if you're smart enough with strategy, if you have a vision, you may be able to create a unicorn, which will be best in your class. So that's kind of opened up. This is democratized all this. You may not be in Silicon Valley, you may be in some part of Africa, but you could come up with the next best idea and you can scale it up. So this is what the world is going to look like in the next 10 years. So a lot of these barriers are coming down. And thank you for your kind words. And regarding InGen, so it's been a very tough journey for us, Kate. And I would like to say that I've had more share of failures than success in the last 8 to 10 years. It's been super hard. And, for us, it's more about surviving and being being able to do the right things, with respect to the business and everything. So I think, we've been fortunate to come up with the various business model which will help us do that. But we are also seeing firsthand how all this disruption is happening to businesses and, to industries and products. And I'm still seeing, I had this interesting conversation, unbelievable conversation last year with a senior partner from a big company. I don't want to name names. And he said, yeah, but I said, no, AI is coming and this is all shifting everything. He said, yeah, but that's just in the IT department, right? So that's just in the IT department. I'm sure there's somebody over there. He's a senior person. He's like C-level executive. He makes decisions for a big organization, by the way. And I was just stunned, right? And that's one of the reasons we have something called AI for all and exec education. We have on our education side streams doing that. So all the things I created came in from all my interaction. I suddenly realized the gap, and I realized, okay, I need this to kind of educate people like that who are like very smart and intelligent, but unfortunately, for some reason, have the wrong perspective, right? So, and that goes in with all the questions you asked on the business. So we need to educate a lot of this business, a lot of this SMEs, a lot of the government bodies. And that's where there's a very important part. We need to culturally sensitize them also, make sure they're mentally prepared to accept all this. And then, so education is very important from that perspective. So create all these workshops and, make sure that you do that. So that's what I think, the next revolution is going to be in terms of in the business impact. It's going to be massive. And nobody can predict who will be the next, the next OpenAI or ChatGPT. I think they're already waiting. So let's wait and see.
Yeah, that's right. I can't tell you how full my inbox is at the moment with proposals that went out over 12 months ago, where people kind of looked at me in boardrooms, senior executives going, yeah, is what you're painting really going to happen? I think we'll just sit on the sidelines and watch it unfold. And now it's like, okay, we're ready to talk. And I think, Australia is definitely a bit behind the US in particular, which is not always a bad thing. But it's certainly fascinating. It's like everyone's woken up in 2025 and gone, okay, we actually need to address this. So completely agree that education and that culture change piece is critical as the first step, because the tech solution is not the first step. It's that really, embedding it into the culture and working with the people to ensure that it's done in those human-centered, safe, ethical, responsible ways. So, Arshad, I know you've mentioned education a couple of times, and I know it's something you're very passionate about, just as we start to wrap up, when you look at the skill set, so if you were talking to people leaving school now, as I was going through school, it was just getting into the coding era. Now they're saying you don't need to learn to code. When you look at the skill sets that are going to be required, say, in the next decade in our workforces, or even personally, what are those skill sets that need to be developed, and where would you be putting your attention?
Sure, I think, yeah, I'm very passionate about education. And in fact, to give you an idea of the range of things I'm doing, so through our partner, we are in 600 plus schools in Middle East and Europe, right? 600 plus schools. And we're doing a STEM kit, and we've finished 1 million hours plus in operation. We're launching in Florida. And I think one of the things we are also experimenting there is AI-enabled tutors, which is really, really good because when we grew up, we were literally thrown a book and say, read from nine to read and understand and regurgitate, right? But we never, nobody asked, do we kind of, are you fascinated by this? Are you fascinated by zebras? Are you fascinated by rabbits? Do you want to know more about rabbits? Do you want to know biology? So we missed out. So I think the new generation of kids can have a personal AI assistant who can kind of know what they need, can adapt to their speed, can adapt to their mood, can adapt to their strength and weakness, and can give them a much better holistic learning experience. So that's at the school level. So we're working towards that. And then on the engineering side, again, we had this internship we started, which we launched, and we had 400 people through that internship. So we went to a college and said that we want to do the internship, and they said, "Don't do the internship, do an engineering degree." And I was stunned. I said, "I don't have a clue about an engineering degree. What am I going to do?" And they sat with us, and we ended up designing a 4 year engineering degree. And then again, Kate, the way I think is it's entrepreneur in me. I thought the engineering degree, the way it's delivered, is very obsolete. It's running for the last 70 years. You go in a classroom, somebody stands on a podium and talk, and you listen. That's not the way to be taught. So this, I kind of radically revamped it. So there are a lot of projects. You have more Q&A in classes rather than lectures. Lectures are mostly online because that's what the new generation is doing. They don't want to kind of sit in class and get bored to death with all these people talking on a podium. So then we revamped that and we have 18 projects and we are now going live in 3 engineering institutions with that. And in fact, with some of the UK universities like Manchester, and we're in talks with Salford, and all of them are very interested in how it's doing. And next is something called AI for All, which is, well, as I mentioned, it's a workshop for everybody, for doctors, lawyers, professional executives, and even a common layman. How can AI impact? So this is a workshop we give for like $10. It's like a throwaway price, and we're giving it free also as part of the foundation, give it for free. And then we have another segment on executive education, which you're doing in Latin America, by the way. So I'm like all over the world literally. So that's in Latin America, but that's for with business schools for executives on AI automation robotics. And these are all interconnected. It's not that I'm unfocused and jumping into all the different things. These are all interconnected, all getting traction, all growing. And and the way I see it, it's a holistic way for me to create an impact, create the next generation, adapt people to the change that is coming, as you rightly mentioned, in the next 10 years. Are people ready across the board for the change that's coming? I'm doing my bit to make sure that that's also getting done. So that's kind of a story behind the education piece.
Yeah, well, that's wonderful. And every time I have these conversations, I'm very heartened by the fact that, I'm not alone. Sometimes you can feel a little bit like you're banging on about this stuff on your own. And it's always lovely when you connect with people who are really values driven and who can see the bigger picture and see the potential of what's coming, but to do that in a really human centered way. So, my last question for you, Ashad, as you stand on the hill and you look out at the next sort of 12 to 18 months, there's talk of all these new models and there's autonomous agents and there's robotics and there's all the changes and potential. What do you see coming down the line, or what are you most enthused about?
I think there's going to be definitely a lot of disruption. There's going to be a lot of change in the way things will be done with especially with the AI agents is going to take a lot of traction. But I also feel there is a lot of hype around all of this. So I don't really think that we're going to have as massive as a disruption as they're predicting. I'll give you an example. I think, and these are some of the top people in the industry. who predicted that in 5 years there won't be people won't be driving cars on the road, and they predicted that in 5 years that you won't be having any radiographers who's reading X-rays. So you know what's happening now? You have radiographers driving cars to work. So and that's still going on. So I think so the thing that I want to insist is that you need to distill a lot of this hype out of it. You're going to have changes. That's going to be slow. And that's not necessarily a bad thing because it's good to have slow changes for culture, process, efficiency. And that's going to be slow. I think it's going to take 5 to 10 years, a lot of this to be adopted by the mainstream government, economies, and SMEs. There's always going to be early adopters who are going to crash and burn and show the world, how it needs to be rightly done. So, and there are going to be some people that's going to kind of, be very, very late at it as well. Maybe like 10, 12 years, they will jump the bandwagon. But I also feel for every business, every individual, every executive, and this is a very important takeaway for anybody listening to this podcast, for every individual, every executive, every company, every government organization, a lot of low-hanging fruits which you can pick from the current boom of AI automation robotics, which can increase your efficiency like 10, 20 fold with very, very little investment in time, effort, and money. So you should identify what are these pieces and go for it straight away. This is a high order bit, and rest is all noise.
Yeah, that's a fantastic note to end on. And Arshad, I'm so grateful for your time today. If people want to reach out and connect with you or find out more about the programs and the initiatives that you're doing, where would you like them to go?
So I have a personal website at arshadhisham.com, and I usually respond to everybody who reaches out. I try to. So I do have, and you can connect me on the website. You can also connect on a company website at InGenDynamics.com. You can mail me. And I'm always looking out for several partners. So I'm very happy to kind of hear from any of you. And I promise to respond to you within 7 days.
Wonderful. That's a great promise to have. Very human centered. Thank you so much, Arshad, for your time. I really appreciate it.
Enjoyed it, Kate, and a fantastic conversation, Kate. Thank you very much.
Thank you for tuning in to the AI Grapple. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with your friends and colleagues and subscribe on your favourite podcast platform. We would love to hear your thoughts, so reach out with any questions or comments about the show. Until next time, keep grappling with AI and stay curious.